All right, everyone, get ready because today we're doing a deep dive all about confidence. You know, that thing we all want more of.
Definitely.
We're looking closely at this really interesting episode of the Fluent English podcast.
Oh, cool.
It is full of really fascinating takeaways.
Awesome.
One of the things that really caught my attention is they say confidence is not just something you're born with.
Right.
It is something you build like a muscle.
Yeah, that is such an interesting way to think about it.
Right. And it makes it seem so much more achievable.
For sure.
So before we jump into all that how-to stuff,
Yeah.
let's just clarify what we're even talking about here. What is confidence?
Well, the Fluent English podcast had a really clear definition, which I really appreciated. They made a distinction between self-confidence and social confidence.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, self-confidence is that deep down belief in your own abilities and your own qualities.
Okay.
It's that inner knowing that you are able to handle whatever challenges come your way and navigate all of life's ups and downs.
I like that.
Yeah, and then social confidence is that feeling of being comfortable and at ease in social situations.
Okay.
So whether that's meeting new people or speaking up in a group or just those everyday interactions that we all have.
Gotcha.
So two different types, but obviously very related.
And I think what is cool is that the podcast says that these two types of confidence are really connected. You know, they say that self-confidence is the foundation for social confidence. So the more you believe in yourself, the easier it becomes to connect with other people and to express yourself authentically.
Right, because when you have that strong sense of self-belief, all of those social situations feel so much less daunting.
Yeah.
You are not as worried about what everyone else is thinking because
Okay.
you really trust in your own value and your own worth. But, you know, it's not just about feeling good.
Okay.
This podcast emphasizes how there are tangible, real-world benefits.
Yes. Give me those benefits. Let's hear them.
Okay, so one of the things I mentioned is how confidence can lead to better decision-making.
Oh.
So when someone believes in themselves and their abilities, they're more likely to trust their instincts and to make decisions in a very convicted way.
Yeah.
Rather than second-guessing themselves all the time, which can waste so much time and energy.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I know when I'm feeling confident, I just make decisions so much more easily.
Yeah, exactly. And the podcast also said that confidence can really improve relationships.
Okay. How so?
So it's not about being arrogant or anything like that. It's just about showing up in a very authentic way and then also setting healthy boundaries.
Right.
People with confidence are usually better at setting boundaries because they know what they deserve and they're not afraid to stand up for their needs,
Yeah, that makes sense.
which ultimately creates more fulfilling and balanced relationships.
Yeah, it's like that self-respect piece, you know.
Yes, exactly.
Knowing what you deserve and not settling for anything less than that.
Totally.
And then I imagine that attracts other people who are also confident and have that same self-respect.
Definitely. It's like you attract what you put out there. It's like a magnet for healthy connections.
Yes, exactly. And it goes beyond just relationships, too. The podcast highlights how important confidence is for resilience.
Oh, interesting.
So if you believe in yourself, you are much more likely to bounce back from those setbacks and challenges that we all inevitably face.
Yeah.
You start to see failures not as personal attacks, but more like opportunities for growth and learning.
Yeah, you're not crumbling under pressure. You're dusting yourself off and you're getting back up.
Exactly like that saying, you know, fall down 7 times, stand up 8.
I love that.
Yeah, confidence gives you that strength to keep trying no matter what.
Okay, so all of this is great, but I'm curious, how does this all actually work in our brains? You know,
Right.
is there some kind of scientific explanation for why confidence makes such a big difference?
Yes, there is. And the podcast delves into this a bit,
Okay.
talking about all those feel-good brain chemicals like dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
When you experience a success or you achieve some kind of goal,
Okay.
your brain rewards you with this hit of dopamine. Well,
Which reinforces that confident behavior and basically makes you want to keep going.
so you're training your brain to be more confident.
Exactly. It's this really cool positive feedback loop.
I love that.
But of course, we all know those times when self-doubt creeps in.
Yeah,
What's happening then?
right. Is our brain like betraying us?
Not really. I mean, everyone experiences self-doubt at times. It's a normal human emotion.
Okay, good.
But it's really important to be able to recognize those thoughts for what they are.
Right.
Just thoughts, not necessarily facts.
Oh, that's a good distinction.
Yeah.
It's like, don't believe everything you think.
Right, exactly. But how do you actually deal with those self-sabotaging thoughts?
Right.
So the podcast suggested a 3-step approach.
Okay, I'm ready.
They call it the recognize, refocus, and respond method.
Okay.
So the first step is you have to be able to recognize those negative thoughts when they come up.
Okay.
So you almost become like a detective in your own mind, really paying attention to those patterns of self-doubt and criticism.
So awareness is key,
Yes, exactly. It's like you are shining a light on those shadowy thoughts and bringing them out into the open so you can deal with them.
But we don't stop there, right?
No. The next step is to refocus your attention on past successes.
Okay.
It is so easy to get stuck in what we haven't done or what we're afraid of doing.
Right.
But it is equally important to remember all those times that we did succeed when we overcame a challenge or achieved something that we're proud of.
Yeah, I actually started doing this thing where I keep like a victory log.
Oh, cool.
I'll write down things big or small that I'm proud of that I've achieved.
That's awesome.
And it's so motivating to look back and be like, oh, wow, I've come a long way.
Yeah, it's like you are building a whole library of evidence to use to combat all of those negative stories. Because when self-doubt creeps in and says you can't do this, you can come back and say, oh, but actually I've done this before. I can do it again.
I love that. Okay, but there are those times when even that is not enough. When those negative thoughts are really persistent.
Right.
What do we do then?
That is where that third step comes, in that response step. And it might seem a little bit counterintuitive, but the podcast suggests that you actually try to embrace those negative thoughts.
Embrace them?
Yeah.
How does that help?
It's not about like wallowing in negativity, but more about just acknowledging the thoughts without judgment.
Okay.
So instead of trying to like push them away or pretend they aren't there, you just kind of sit with them and observe them and let them pass.
Okay.
It's like watching those clouds drift by.
Okay, so we're accepting that those thoughts are there, but we're not going to let them control us.
Exactly. You are developing a sense of detachment from the thoughts, understanding that they are just thoughts, not necessarily facts.
Right.
And they don't define you or your abilities.
Nice.
And then once you've done that, you can start to reframe them.
Right. The podcast talks about that reframing piece. You
Yeah.
know? It's like changing your perspective so you can see things in a more positive or empowering light.
Exactly.
But how do we actually do that?
Well, one technique they mentioned is to just ask yourself, what is the evidence for this thought?
Ooh.
So it's like you're putting your negative thoughts on trial.
Right.
And a lot of times when we really examine the evidence, we find that those beliefs are often based on fear or assumptions that are not necessarily true.
Yeah, and even if there is some evidence for that thought, it might not be as bad as we think it is.
Exactly.
It might be an opportunity for us to grow or learn something rather than some kind of failure.
Exactly. Reframing is all about turning those I can't thoughts into either I can thoughts or at least I can try thoughts.
I love that.
It's about looking for the positive or the opportunity in any situation, even if it's challenging.
Yeah, it's like turning those negative thoughts into fuel for growth.
Yes, exactly.
Well, let's be real. This is easier said than done. Are there any other strategies that we can use to kind of help us reframe our thinking and boost our confidence?
Yes, definitely. The podcast had a lot of tips. One of my favorites was the idea of setting achievable goals.
Yes, a classic.
The classic for a reason.
Break down those big, scary goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
Exactly. And then as you achieve each one, it builds momentum.
Yeah.
And reinforces those feelings of confidence.
Yeah.
It's like you are building a staircase to success one step at a time.
It's much less intimidating that way.
Yes, definitely.
But what about when we feel like we're constantly letting other people down or we're putting their needs before our own?
Right.
How does that tie into confidence?
That's a great question, and the podcast actually addresses that pretty directly. They talk a lot about the importance of setting boundaries.
Okay, boundaries. This is something I personally struggle with so much.
Yeah.
Sometimes saying no feels so uncomfortable, but I can see how it connects to confidence.
Yeah, it really is about recognizing your own worth and your own limits. And when you are constantly overextending yourself or saying yes to things you don't really want to do,
Right.
you end up feeling resentful and depleted, which is not going to help you feel confident.
It's like saying I respect myself enough to prioritize my own well-being, which is a huge confidence booster in itself.
Exactly. And it also sends a message to other people that you value your time and energy.
Yeah.
So it's about having those healthy boundaries in all types of relationships,
Right.
whether it's personal or professional.
Okay. Boundaries, check.
Yep.
What else can we do to kind of nurture our confidence?
Well, the podcast also talked a lot about the importance of self-care.
Oh, yes. Self-care.
Yeah, and they really emphasize that self-care is not selfish.
Right.
It's really essential if you want to maintain your well-being and just show up as your best, most confident self.
Yeah, it's like putting on your own oxygen mask first so that you can help other people.
Exactly.
Because when you're depleted and burnt out, it's so hard to feel confident. But when you prioritize taking care of yourself, it's like you're giving yourself the energy and resources you need to thrive.
Totally.
So what kind of self-care are we talking about here? I'm thinking bubble baths and face masks.
Yeah. I mean, those are nice.
Yeah.
But it's definitely deeper than that.
Okay.
The podcast really talked about how it's important to find those activities that nourish your body and your soul.
Okay.
Things that help you feel good and energized and fulfilled.
So it could be exercise or spending time in nature.
Yes.
Reading, listening to music, meditating.
Yes.
Pursuing creative hobbies.
Yeah.
Anything that kind of fills your cup.
Exactly.
And helps you recharge.
Yes. And it's going to be different for everyone.
Right.
So the key is just to find what works for you and make it a regular practice in your life.
Okay. Boundaries, self-care. What about the people that we surround ourselves with? Does that play a role in our confidence levels?
Definitely. The podcast brought up a really good point about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who are positive and supportive.
Yeah, because negativity is contagious.
Yeah.
If you're around people who are constantly doubting you or criticizing you or just bringing you down,
yeah,
it's going to chip away at your confidence.
Totally. It's like you're in this toxic cloud all the time.
Exactly. On the other hand, if you're around people who believe in you, who encourage you and celebrate your successes, it's like having this amazing cheerleading squad that's constantly boosting you up.
It's so true. It's amazing how much our social circle can influence our perception of ourselves.
Yeah.
We start to internalize those messages that we hear from the people around us.
Right. So it's so important to be mindful of who we allow into that inner circle.
Definitely. And to make a conscious effort to build relationships with people who inspire us and make us feel good.
Yes, for sure. Those relationships are so valuable.
Yes, they are. But it's not just about the people that we surround ourselves with. It's also about how we think about ourselves.
Oh, you're talking about that inner critic, right?
Yeah.
That voice in our head that can be so mean.
It can be brutal.
Yeah.
But the podcast had this really interesting segment about the power of gratitude.
Oh, yeah.
And how if you intentionally shift your focus to what you are grateful for,
right,
it can have a really big impact on your confidence levels.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's so easy to get caught up in all the things that we lack or what we're not good at.
Right.
But when we intentionally shift our attention to all the good things, it can really change our whole perspective.
Exactly. It's like a mental reset button.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're feeling down or insecure, focusing on all the good things can really help to reframe your thinking and improve your mood.
And those good things don't have to be big things, right?
No, not at all.
It could be something as simple as like a sunny day or a warm cup of coffee.
Totally.
Or even a nice gesture from a stranger.
Exactly. The key is just to make it a practice. You know,
right.
Whether you keep a gratitude journal or you write thank you notes or you just take a few moments each day to reflect on all the things that you are grateful for. The more that we do that, the more we start to see the world through a lens of abundance rather than scarcity.
Yeah.
That can have a really positive effect on our confidence.
I love that gratitude is so simple but so powerful.
It is.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about body language, challenging those negative thoughts, setting boundaries, prioritizing self-care.
Right.
Surrounding yourself with positive people.
Yes.
And cultivating gratitude.
It's a lot.
Are we missing anything?
Well, there is one more really important piece that the Fluent English podcast talked about, and it's a big one. It's social confidence.
Social confidence, that's a whole other beast.
It is.
Social situations can be so intimidating.
Yeah.
Especially for those of us who are a little more introverted.
I hear you, but don't worry. We're going to cover all of that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, great.
We'll explore all those strategies for navigating social situations with more confidence and more ease.
Awesome. I can't wait.
Oh.
All right, so we've talked about why confidence is so important and why we should care about it. Now, let's get into the how-to.
Yes, let's get practical.
Where do we even begin? How do we actually start building this confidence muscle?
Well, one thing that really stood out to me from the Fluent English podcast was this idea about the power of body language.
Oh, yeah. They talked about how even if you just act confident, it can actually send signals to your brain.
Right.
Which can then lead to genuine feelings of confidence.
Yeah.
It's kind of like fake it till you make it, but with a scientific twist.
Exactly. It might sound a little strange, but there's actually research to back this up.
Really?
Yeah, studies have shown that simply adopting a confident posture, like standing up straight with your shoulders back, your head held high, can trigger physiological changes in your body.
So just by standing differently, we can actually change things on like a chemical level.
It's pretty amazing, right?
Yeah, that is amazing.
The podcast even mentioned this one study where participants held what they called a power pose for just 2 minutes, and they saw a significant increase in their testosterone levels.
Wow.
Which is a hormone that is often linked to confidence and assertiveness.
Interesting.
And at the same time, they saw a decrease in their levels of cortisol, which is the stress hormone.
So it's like you can actually fake it till you make it on a hormonal level.
Pretty much.
Wow. I'm definitely going to be paying more attention to my posture from now on.
Me too.
But how do we deal with those pesky negative thoughts?
Yeah.
Those thoughts that can really sabotage our confidence.
Right. Well, that's where the recognize, refocus, and respond method comes in.
Right.
Remember, that first step is all about recognizing those negative thoughts as they pop up. It's like you're becoming a detective in your own mind.
Okay.
Just noticing those patterns of self-doubt and criticism.
Okay, so awareness is key. But what do we do once we've identified those thoughts?
Right. We can't just let them run wild.
No.
The next step is to refocus your attention on past successes.
Okay.
It's really easy to get caught up in what we haven't done or what we're afraid of.
Right.
But it's so important to remember all those times that we did succeed.
Right.
When we overcame a challenge or we accomplished something that we're proud of.
I actually started keeping this little victory log.
Oh, nice.
Where I write down things big or small that I've accomplished and I'm proud of.
That's a great idea.
And it's really motivating to look back and see, oh, wow, I've actually come a long way.
I love that it's like you're creating this library of evidence that you can use.
Yeah.
To combat all those negative stories that our minds like to tell us.
Yes, exactly. So when that self-doubt creeps in and whispers, you can't do this,
right?
You can say, oh, but actually I have done this before and I can do it again.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay. But I'm wondering, what if those negative thoughts are super persistent?
Yeah.
What if even looking back at past successes isn't quite enough to quiet them down?
That's where that respond step comes in. And this might seem a little counterintuitive.
Okay.
But the podcast suggests that we should actually try to embrace those negative thoughts.
Wait, embrace negativity. How does that help?
It's not about wallowing in it or anything like that.
Okay.
It's more about acknowledging those thoughts without judgment.
Okay.
So rather than trying to push them away or pretend they don't exist,
right,
you just kind of observe them and let them pass.
Okay.
It's like watching clouds drift by in the sky.
Okay. So it's more about acceptance.
Yeah.
Recognizing that those thoughts are there, but we're not going to let them control us.
Exactly. You're developing a sense of detachment from those thoughts. Realizing that they're just thoughts, not facts.
Yeah.
And they don't define you or your capabilities.
I see.
And once you've done that, you can actually start to reframe them.
Right. The podcast talk about reframing.
Yes.
Which is like shifting your perspective to see things in a more positive or empowering light.
Exactly.
But how do we actually do that?
Well, one technique they mentioned is to just ask yourself, what's the evidence for this thought?
Okay.
It's like you're putting those negative thoughts on trial. And oftentimes when we really examine the evidence, we find that a lot of those negative beliefs are based on fear or assumptions that might not even be true.
Right. And even if there is some evidence to support that thought,
Right.
it might not be as bad as we initially thought.
Exactly.
It could actually be an opportunity for us to learn and grow.
Exactly. Reframing is all about turning those I can't thoughts into I can thoughts, or at least I can try thoughts.
I love that.
It's about finding the positive or the opportunity in every situation, even the challenging ones.
It's like turning those negative thoughts into fuel for growth.
Yes, exactly.
But let's be honest, it's easier said than done.
For sure.
Are there any other strategies that we can use to help us reframe our thinking and boost our confidence?
Yes. Definitely. The podcast had tons of great tips. One of my favorites was the idea of setting achievable goals.
Oh, yeah. Breaking down those big, scary goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
Exactly. And then each time you accomplish one of those smaller goals, it builds momentum and reinforces those feelings of confidence. It's like you're building a staircase to success one step at a time.
But it feels so much less overwhelming that way.
Absolutely.
But what about when we feel like we're constantly letting other people down or we're putting their needs before our own?
Yeah.
How does that tie into this whole idea of confidence?
Well, that's a great point, and the podcast addressed that directly.
Okay.
They talked a lot about the importance of setting boundaries.
Boundaries? Oh, man. This is something I personally struggle with so much.
Yeah, it's hard.
Saying no can feel so uncomfortable, but I can see how it relates to confidence.
Yeah, it's about recognizing your own worth and your own limits.
Right.
And when we're constantly overextending ourselves or saying yes to things that we don't really want to do, we end up feeling resentful and depleted, which doesn't exactly make us feel confident.
Right. It's like saying I respect myself enough to prioritize my own well-being.
Exactly.
Which is a huge confidence boost in itself.
Exactly. And it also sends a message to other people that you value your time and your energy.
That's a good point.
It's about establishing those healthy boundaries in all your relationships, whether it's personal or professional.
Okay. Boundaries. Check. What else can we do to nurture our confidence?
Well, Bloscast also talked a lot about self-care.
Self-care, yes.
And they emphasized how self-care is not selfish.
Right.
It's actually crucial for maintaining your well-being and for showing up as your best, most confident self.
Yeah, it's like that saying, put on your own oxygen mask first before helping others.
Exactly.
Because when you are feeling depleted and burnt out, it's really hard to feel confident.
For sure.
But when you prioritize taking care of yourself, you're giving yourself the energy and the resources that you need to really thrive.
Totally.
So what kind of self-care are we talking about? Like bubble baths and face masks?
I mean, those are great.
I like those.
But it goes a little deeper than that.
Okay.
The podcast really emphasized how it's about finding those activities that nourish your mind, body, and soul.
Right.
Things that truly make you feel good and energized and fulfilled.
So it could be exercise or spending time in nature.
Yeah.
Reading, listening to music meditation.
Yeah.
Pursuing creative hobbies. Anything that fills your cup.
Exactly.
And helps you recharge.
Yes. And it's going to look different for everyone.
Right.
The key is to just find what works for you and make it a regular practice in your life.
Okay, boundaries, self-care. What about the people that we surround ourselves with?
Right.
Does that impact our confidence levels?
It definitely does. The podcast made a great point about how important it is to surround yourself with positive and supportive people.
Yeah, because we know that negativity is contagious.
It really is.
And if you're constantly surrounded by people who doubt you or criticize you or just bring you down, it's going to chip away at your confidence.
It's like you're constantly breathing in this toxic cloud.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when you're surrounded by people who believe in you and encourage you and celebrate your successes, it's like having this amazing cheerleading squad.
Yes.
That's constantly boosting you up.
It's amazing how much our social circle can influence how we see ourselves. We start to internalize those messages that we hear from the people around us.
Right. So it's so important to be mindful about who we let into that inner circle.
Definitely. And to consciously seek out those connections with people who inspire us and lift us up.
Yeah, those relationships are like gold.
They really are, but it's not just about the people we surround ourselves with.
Okay.
It's also about how we think about ourselves.
You're talking about that inner critic?
Yes, the voice in our head that can be so mean.
Oh, it's brutal.
It can be, but the podcast had this really interesting segment about the power of gratitude and how intentionally shifting your focus to all the things that you're grateful for can have a big impact on your confidence levels.
Yeah, it makes sense because it's so easy to get caught up in what we lack or what we're not good at.
Right.
But when we can intentionally shift our attention to all the good things in our lives, it can really change our whole perspective.
It's like this mental reset button, when you're feeling kind of down or insecure, focusing on the good can help to reframe your thinking and lift your mood.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be big things.
No.
It could be as simple as a sunny day or a warm cup of coffee.
Exactly.
Or a kind gesture from a stranger.
The little things matter.
Yeah.
The key is to make it a practice.
Right.
Whether that's keeping a gratitude journal or writing thank you notes or just taking a few moments each day to reflect on all the things that you're grateful for.
Yes.
The more we do that, the more we start to see the world through a lens of abundance rather than scarcity.
Yeah.
And that can have such a positive impact on our confidence.
I love that gratitude is such a simple but powerful practice.
It really is.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about body language.
Yeah.
Challenging those negative thoughts, setting boundaries, prioritizing self-care, surrounding ourselves with positive people, and cultivating gratitude.
It's a lot. But they're missing in it? Well, there is one more key area that the Fluent English podcast talked about, and it's a big one. It's social confidence.
Social confidence.
Yes.
That's a whole other beast.
It is. Social situations can be so intimidating.
Oh, especially for people who are a little bit more introverted.
I hear you, but don't worry. We're going to dive into all of that in our next segment.
Okay, good.
We'll explore all those strategies for navigating social situations with more confidence and ease.
Awesome. I can't wait.
Me too.
All right, so it's time to tackle the social jungle.
Yes.
I have to say, this is where I need the most help.
I think a lot of people feel that way.
Sometimes those social situations just feel like a minefield.
Right. It's so easy to feel like you're the only one who struggles. But the truth is that social confidence, just like self-confidence, is a skill you can build.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. And the Fluent English podcast had some really helpful tips.
Okay, my all ears. Let's hear them.
So one of the things they really emphasized was the importance of good communication skills.
Okay.
Which might seem kind of obvious.
Right.
But it's like the foundation,
Yeah.
If you want to have confidence social interactions, if you're able to express yourself clearly and listen, well, it really takes a lot of the pressure off.
Yeah, makes sense. If you feel like you can actually get your point across and you can understand what other people are saying,
Right.
it just makes the whole interaction feel a lot smoother.
Exactly.
So what does effective communication actually look like, in practice?
So the podcast talked about active listening as being super important.
Okay.
It's not just about hearing what the other person is saying.
Right.
It's about really engaging with their words.
Okay.
Asking clarifying questions, showing that you're genuinely interested.
So it's about really being present in the conversation.
Yes, exactly.
Not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Right.
And I'm definitely guilty of that sometimes, thinking about what I'm going to say next instead of really listening to what the other person is saying.
We've all been there. But when you can really listen and engage, it creates a connection.
Right.
And it makes the whole interaction feel more natural and more enjoyable for everyone involved.
Yeah, I like that.
And then, of course, clear expression is important, too.
Right.
Being able to articulate your thoughts and feelings in a way that other people can understand.
Yeah, that's key.
It's really important for confident communication.
Okay. Active listening, clear expression. Got it.
Yes.
But sometimes, even when you're a good communicator, those social situations can still feel really intimidating.
Right.
Any advice for overcoming that initial fear or that awkwardness?
Right. So this is where I thought the Fluent English podcast offered a really interesting perspective.
Okay.
They suggested embracing vulnerability.
Wait, vulnerability. How does that help?
I know it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but their point was that by being authentic and open, by letting people see your true self, you actually become more relatable and more approachable.
So it's about letting go of that need to appear perfect and just being yourself.
Exactly. Flaws and
yeah, that can be really liberating.
It is. It takes the pressure off. And it allows others to connect with you on a deeper level because ultimately people are drawn to authenticity.
Yeah, it's like saying, hey, I'm not perfect, and that's okay.
Right.
Which I think is a message we could all use a reminder of.
Definitely.
But what about those times when you're thrown into a social situation with people you don't know at all?
Right.
Any tips for navigating that?
Well, the podcast talked about how it's important to find common ground.
Okay.
Even if you don't have the same interests or background as someone, there's always something that you can connect over.
Like what? I'm drawing a blank.
It could be something as simple as the event that you're both at.
Okay.
Or a recent news story, or even just the weather.
Okay.
Or maybe you comment on something you notice in your surroundings. It's really just about finding that spark that can start a conversation and help you get to know the other person.
Okay, so it's about looking for those little points of connection. It's those shared experiences that can bridge the gap.
Right. It takes the pressure off of trying to be like super witty or interesting right away.
Right. Or having the perfect opening line.
Exactly. And remember, most people love to talk about themselves.
That's true.
So asking questions, showing genuine interest.
Yeah.
It's a great way to keep the conversation going and make the other person feel heard.
Yeah, that's a good point. It kind of takes the focus off of yourself.
Right.
Which can definitely help with those nervous feelings.
For sure. But let's be real. Sometimes just the thought of putting yourself out there socially can feel really overwhelming.
Yeah.
So the Fluent English podcast emphasized that just like any other skill, social confidence takes practice.
Right. The more you do it, the more comfortable you'll become.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So go to those events, join that club, strike up conversations with people you meet throughout your day.
Okay.
The more you do it, the less scary it will feel.
Okay. So it's about getting out of our comfort zone.
Yes. Challenge yourself to talk to someone new, to initiate a conversation, to speak up in a group. Even if you're feeling a little nervous.
Right.
It's like those small steps we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Each interaction, even if it's a little awkward or uncomfortable at first, is a step toward building your social confidence.
And it's okay to make mistakes.
Absolutely. Social interactions are rarely perfect.
Right.
And we all have those moments where we feel a little awkward or tongue-tied.
For sure.
The important thing is to just learn from it and keep practicing.
This has been such an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've covered so much ground, from understanding the different types of confidence to exploring all these amazing practical strategies for building confidence in every area of our lives.
And the biggest takeaway, I think, is that confidence is not something that some people just have and others don't.
Right.
It's a skill we can all build with effort and practice. And it's a journey, you know? It's not a destination. There are going to be ups and downs, setbacks and breakthroughs.
For sure.
But the most important thing is to just keep moving forward one step at a time.
I love that, after this deep dive, I'm feeling so inspired to be a little bit bolder.
Yeah.
To get out of my comfort zone a little bit and just see what happens.
That's awesome. And remember, you're not alone on this journey,
Yeah.
We all have those moments of self-doubt, but the more we practice these strategies, the stronger that confidence muscle becomes.
This has been such a great conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into confidence.
It was my pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, you've got this.